A 42-year-old US man has been charged with attempting to kidnap Nancy Pelosi, the third most senior politician in America. David Abape raided the speaker's home in San Francisco and attacked her 82-year-old husband with a hammer. His motive is yet to be disclosed, but police say it wasn't random. It comes just months after an alleged assassination attempt on Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh, raising fresh concerns about political violence in an already very polarised country. President Biden today condemned the attack.
The chant was, "Where's Nancy? Where's Nancy? Where's Nancy?" Enough is enough is enough. Every person of good conscience needs to clearly and unambiguously stand up against the violence in our politics, regardless what your politics are.
Well, joining me now, the Republican Senator for Arkansas, Tom Cotton. Senator, thank you very much indeed for joining me. I appreciate it. What was your reaction to what President Biden said there?
Well, first off, I condemn the violent attack on Paul Pelosi. I wish him well. I hope he has a full recovery. We should throw the book at his assailant, just like we should throw the book at all violent criminals, not just those who commit crimes against the powerful and the wealthy, but people who are pushing New Yorkers in front of subway trains or committing carjackings or committing murders. Too often, we have gone soft on crime in this country in recent years, and I think that's contributed to the crime wave we've had. But if Joe Biden wants to be serious about political violence, why didn't he have his own Department of Justice enforce the law this summer when you had left-wing agitators protesting in front of Supreme Court justices' homes in direct violation of federal law, which culminated with a deranged left-wing hitman traveling from California trying to assassinate Brett Kavanaugh? I condemn that just as strongly and think we should throw the book at him as well.
Well, I don't disagree with you. I would agree with you about that. I suppose my question would be, should we throw the book also at people who are political, either politicians or budding politicians, have big public profiles, who make a mockery of incidents like the appalling attack on Paul Pelosi? Would you throw the book at them as well?
Well, their words, though unwise and unhelpful to healthy debate, are protected by the First Amendment. Look, there's a lot of heated rhetoric and campaign, but pointing out that Nancy Pelosi passed Obamacare 12 years ago or has spent trillions of dollars we don't have and contributed to this inflation has no bearing whatsoever on this violence.
Well, I wasn't actually referring to that. I was actually referring to this, well, two clips, actually. One is the Arizona governor candidate, Carrie Lake, who said this in response to what happened.
It is not impossible to protect our kids at school. They act like it is. Nancy Pelosi, well, she's got protection when she's in D.C. Apparently her house doesn't have a lot of protection.
I mean, hearing an audience laugh out loud at such a crass comment, you must share my horror at that, don't you?
Well, Piers, again, rhetoric on the campaign trail that may be tough does not contribute to this kind of violence. It's, if anything, what you heard there, what you've heard from Republicans about Nancy Pelosi, pales in contrast, say, what Chuck Schumer said on the steps of the Supreme Court, that Brett Kavanaugh wouldn't know what hit him if he issued rulings that Chuck Schumer disagreed with.
I'm not for a moment defending anything else that you've been talking about, and I think they've all been appalling incidents. But for instance, Donald Trump Jr. put a Halloween tweet out, which he then deleted, which said this. This is a picture, as you can see there, of a hammer on a pair of underpants, and Donald Trump Jr. tweeted, "The internet remains undefeated, and if you switch out the hammer for a red feather boa, you could be Hunter Biden in an instant." Now, again, I would simply say that if you're going to, say that we've got to throw people out for bad behaviour, bad commentary, bad whatever, these are just, to me, extraordinarily crass things to be doing in the light of an elderly man who happens to be the husband of the United States Speaker, who was nearly killed in this attack, from all accounts. This is not a subject for humour, is it?
Well, Piers, I can only tell you what I think it is. I think it's a heinous attack, and we should be throwing the book at people who commit these violent acts, whether against Paul Pelosi or Brett Kavanaugh or just ordinary Americans. Something that politicians may say in the heat of the campaign, you could think is crass or that it's poor judgment, but it's not the same as committing these acts of violence.
No, listen, I'm not for a moment saying it's the same. I just think it would be really helpful. I speak because I'm in a country right now, Britain, where 2 members of parliament have been murdered by crazy people in the last 6 years. And I'm extremely worried, as someone who has a house in America, spends a lot of time over there, loves the country, loves the people. I'm very worried that the temperature of political debate is reaching the kind of levels which we had here over Brexit and other incendiary issues, which caused crazy people to do crazy things to our politicians. And I don't want to see the next bit of news that we see in America being that an actual politician has been murdered by a crazy person, because the rhetoric being hurled around by people and the lack of seriousness taken by political figures when these things happen as well, by the way, that all this, it doesn't help, does it? Isn't it time that everybody dial things down?
Well, Piers, I think you can have tough campaigns, you can have spirited debates, but you can also be civil and respectful. Now, I think in many of these cases, unfortunately, like it would appear with the Paul Pelosi incident or Gabby Giffords incident more than a decade ago, you're dealing with someone who has serious mental health issues as well, which raises a different set of public policy questions. But I think it's best that we have spirited debates, but debates that are respectful and civil and recognize that we're all Americans, or in your case, all British, and that we can have disagreements, that we can settle those disagreements through our elected representatives or at the ballot box.
Yeah, I can endorse that. Now, Senator, you've got an extraordinary background. You served in Iraq with the 101st Airborne Division and in Afghanistan with the Provincial Reconstruction Team. Between combat tours, you served with the 3rd Infantry Regiment, the Old Guard at Arlington National Cemetery, which I've been to, which is a remarkable place. So a really commendable military career. And I wanted to ask you specifically about one part of what's going on in the world right now involving Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and what the recently deposed British Prime Minister Boris Johnson said today about the nuclear threat which Putin keeps making.
I don't think he will. I think he'd be crazy to do so. What would happen is that he would immediately tender Russia's resignation from the club of civilized nations. It would be a total disaster for his country.
What did you make of that comment?
Well, I tend to agree with Boris. I know that Vladimir Putin has rattled the nuclear saber. We've seen no indication of him taking any kind of steps to use nuclear weapons, nor can we allow the nuclear threat to allow him to blackmail the United States or blackmail the West. I've got a new book out called Only the Strong, and I write about exactly this kind of threat throughout the Cold War. Ronald Reagan took a very strong, assertive stance against Soviet Russian communism, even though the nuclear threat then was just as dangerous as it is now. We have to be strong, we have to be resolute in the defense of America's national interests. And as you saw time and time again with Ronald Reagan, that kind of strength and resolution didn't lead to nuclear war, it didn't lead to World War III, it led to victory and success in the Cold War.
There are Republicans, it's quite interesting, I've just been in America actually, I went to New York, LA and talked to a lot of people. Republicans do seem a bit split about Ukraine and about how far America should be going to help the Ukrainians. Some Republicans bang up for it and think that they should be giving him whatever he needs, President Zelensky, to win the war, recognizing perhaps the wider threat to the world, including America, if Putin was to win. But other Republicans, and I'm quite surprised about this, have taken a view that it's not really in America's interest to get involved in this conflict at all. What's your view?
Well, I think it is in our interest to support the Ukrainians fighting in their own war to defend their own territory. That's what we've been doing from the beginning. If we had done it earlier and if Joe Biden hadn't granted so many concessions to Vladimir Putin in 2021, I don't think he would have been tempted to go for the jugular in Ukraine in the first place. I go into great detail about this in Only the Strong. And when I'm traveling across Arkansas, when I'm traveling on the campaign trail across America, I hear that most Americans want to continue to support the Ukrainians who are fighting their own war. There is frustration. They don't think enough European nations are doing their part. Now, there are some weapons that only America has, that only we can provide. But when it comes to financial aid for the government in Ukraine, there's certainly a lot of nations in Europe that could be doing more to help pull their share of the load.
Finally, Senator, I was going to let you plug your book, but you've done that very comprehensively and very impressively, I must say, several times. I won't bother, although I'm told it's a great read. I do want to ask you, though, if, as is suspected, there's a red wave in the midterms next week, and I think it's pretty clear now that that is probably going to happen, there's going to be a lot of speculation about who will be the Republican candidate in the next general election in 2024, and your name is being thrown around with more gusto. Can you say definitively whether you would be interested in running to be president?
Well, Piers, I appreciate the question. I think I'll keep my focus on the election that's just a few days away rather than the elections that 2 years away. But I will say this. anyone running for president in the Republican Party who wants to help restore American strength and power in the world should get themselves a copy of Only the Strong and learn exactly how to do that.
You know what? If the presidential race is determined by somebody who can shoehorn the most mentions of their book title into one 8-minute interview, you, sir, are heading to the White House. Senator, I appreciate you coming on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Piers.